Imagine coming home to find your HOA president screaming about your Jeep, threatening to tow it, and filming you like you're a criminal. But when your grandfather steps out with his cane, she drops her phone and runs, actually runs. What could make a tyrant flee from one old man? Before we begin, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss stories like this. That monstrosity you call a Jeep is destroying our property values. HOA President Brenda Sullivan screamed, shoving a fine in my face. I'm calling the cops to tow this eyesore. But when my grandfather shuffled out with his cane, she froze mid-dial, her eyes locked on something. Maybe his face, maybe his posture, I couldn't tell. The phone slipped from her trembling hand. No, it can't be, she breathed, stumbling backward. Grandpa just tapped his cane once. Hello, Brenda. She turned and ran. Actually ran, she marched closer, her perfectly pressed pantsuit making swishing sounds with each aggressive step. Clipboard clutched to her chest like a weapon. Behind her, I noticed Sarah Bennett watching from her porch, coffee mug in hand, trying to hide a smirk. Brenda's face had turned an interesting shade of purple that clashed terribly with her coral lipstick. Don't you good morning me, Ethan. Last week, you drove this thing through our neighborhood at an ungodly hour, waking half the residents with your obnoxiously loud engine, and now look at it, covered in mud, parked crooked, with that ridiculous license plate. She pointed at my Liberty 22 plates like they'd personally offended her ancestors. The old sheriff department logo on the spare tire cover seemed to make her eye twitch. Furthermore, you're in violation of HOA codes 17.23 and 3.1 regarding vehicle cleanliness, parking alignment, and noise ordinances. I glanced at my Jeep, then back at her, fighting the urge to laugh. The mud was from helping my neighbor move furniture yesterday, the same neighbor who'd thanked me profusely while Brenda watched from her window with binoculars. Brenda, I drove home from work at 6 p.m. last Tuesday. If that's an ungodly hour, then half of Pineview Heights must be vampires. As for the mud, well, some of us actually use our vehicles for more than just trips to the organic grocery store. Her face somehow managed to turn an even deeper shade of purple. Your attitude is exactly why this neighborhood is going downhill. That vehicle is an eyesore, and your flagrant disregard for our community standards is unacceptable. She thrust a paper at me. A $200 fine for multiple HOA violations. Then, to my amazement, she pulled out her phone and started recording me. This is Ethan Carter, resident of 47 Maple Drive, receiving his official HOA violation notice for his disruptive vehicle and antisocial behavior. Antisocial? I couldn't help but chuckle. Lady, I helped 3 neighbors last month alone. Mrs. Chen with her groceries, the Johnsons when their car broke down. Irrelevant, she snapped, still filming. Your vehicle is a blight on this community. I'm posting this to our neighborhood group as a warning to others who think they can flout our rules. She spun on her heel and marched away, leaving me holding the fine and wondering if hidden cameras would reveal this was all an elaborate prank. Sarah wandered over, shaking her head. That woman is something else last month. She fined me $50 because my trash can was the wrong shade of green. Said it was forest green when the HOA mandates hunter green. I studied the fine, noting how vague the violations were. Excessive noise with no decibel readings. Improper parking with no specifics. Vehicle maintenance violations without explaining what exactly was wrong. It was like she'd written it with a random violation generator. If my Jeep's a criminal, I said, tapping the hood affectionately, then Brenda's lawn is a dictator. Have you seen how she measures her grass with an actual ruler? Sarah laughed, but her eyes showed concern. Be careful, Ethan. She's driven out 3 families in the past 2 years. The Petersons moved after she fined them $5,000 for unauthorized landscaping. They'd planted roses without HOA approval. The Giants left after she called the cops on their son's birthday party at Toot Harders in the afternoon. And the Smiths? They're still fighting her in court over some made-up structural violation. I spent the rest of the day deep cleaning my Jeep, partly out of spite and partly because I didn't want to give Brenda any more ammunition. Every few minutes, I'd catch her watching from her window with those binoculars. By evening, my Jeep sparkled like it had just rolled off the assembly line. The Liberty. 22 plates gleamed in the setting sun, and the Sheriff Department logo on the spare tire cover looked proudly defiant. A week passed with blessed quiet. I thought maybe Brenda had found a new target, but I should have known better. While doing my weekly maintenance check, I heard it, a faint beeping coming from under the rear bumper. My blood ran cold as I slid underneath and found exactly what I'd feared. A GPS tracker, stuck there with heavy-duty magnets. The device was small, black, and definitely not something that had accidentally attached itself to my vehicle. I ripped it off, staring at it in disbelief. This went way beyond HOA harassment. This was stalking. I stood there in my driveway, tracker in hand, looking at Lily's pink bicycle propped against the garage. My 8-year-old daughter would be visiting next weekend, and the thought of Brenda tracking our every move made my protective instincts flare. If Brenda's touching my family, I growled, pocketing the device, she's picked the wrong target. Tomorrow was the monthly HOA meeting, and I was going to crash her precious little power party. What Brenda didn't know was that I'd grown up in a family of fighters. Not the fist-throwing kind, but the smart kind who knew how to use someone's own rules against them. Time to show her what happened when you mess with Ethan Carter and his Jeep. 2 weeks after finding that GPS tracker, I walked into the Pine View Heights Community Center for the monthly HOA meeting, evidence burning a hole in my pocket. The room smelled like bad coffee and broken dreams, filled with neighbors who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Brenda sat at the head table like a queen holding court, flanked by her board members who nodded at everything she said like dashboard bobbleheads. Walter, my 75-year-old grandfather who'd been staying with me since his hip surgery, shuffled in beside me, playing up his confused old man routine perfectly. "Is this the bingo hall?" he asked loudly, causing several people to chuckle. Brenda's eye twitched. She hated when anyone disrupted her perfectly orchestrated meetings. Sarah had saved us seats in the middle section, close enough to be heard but far enough to make a quick exit if needed. Greg Larson, Brenda's most devoted supporter, sat in the front row like a teacher's pet, waiting for a gold star. "Before we begin tonight's agenda," Brenda announced, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "I'd like to address the elephant in the room, or should I say, the eyesore in the driveway, Mr. Carter. Would you care to explain why you've been harassing me?" The room went silent. I stood slowly, pulling out the GPS tracker. "Funny you should mention harassment, Brenda. Would you care to explain why this was attached to my vehicle?" I held it up for everyone to see. For those who can't see from the back, this is a GPS tracking device I found stuck under my Jeep's bumper. Now, I'm no lawyer, but I'm pretty sure stalking is illegal in all 50 states. Brenda's face remained calm, but I caught the slight widening of her eyes. "How dare you accuse me of such a thing? That could have come from anywhere. Maybe you put it there yourself to frame me, after all. You've been nothing but hostile since I rightfully fined you for your violations." Walter chose that moment to fumble with his keys, dropping them loudly on the floor. As he bent to retrieve them with exaggerated difficulty, he muttered, "In my day, we didn't need fancy gadgets to know where people were. We just looked out the window like normal folks." Several people laughed, and Brenda's face flushed. "Mr. Hayes, please refrain from interrupting. This is a serious matter." Walter straightened up, winking at me when Brenda wasn't looking. "Oh, I'm sorry, dear. What were we talking about?" "I thought this was bingo night," I pressed on, ignoring Brenda's attempt to derail the conversation. "I have photos of the tracker, including its serial number. I'm sure the police would be very interested in tracing where it was purchased and by whom, unless, of course, you'd like to admit to this violation of privacy, and we can handle it without involving law enforcement. How dare you threaten me in my own meeting? Brenda stood, her chair scraping against the floor. You, Mr. Carter, are the real problem here first. You refuse to comply with basic neighborhood standards. Then you make wild accusations. And now you're trying to intimidate the HOA board. She turned to her fellow board members. I motion to increase Mr. Carter's fine to $500 for continued violations and hostile behavior. Furthermore, if that Jeep isn't removed from the property within 30 days, we'll have it towed at the owner's expense. Greg started clapping enthusiastically before anyone had even seconded the motion. Yes, about time someone stood up to these troublemakers. The board members exchanged glances before reluctantly seconding and approving the motion. I watched as neighbor after neighbor avoided eye contact. Too afraid to speak up, after the meeting, Sarah caught up with me in the parking lot while Walter pretended to have trouble finding our car. That was brutal, she said. But you handled it well. That witch has gotten too comfortable with her power trips. Walter finally found the car and climbed in, suddenly sharp as a tack. Boy! That woman's more wound up than a Swiss watch. Reminded me of this sergeant I knew back in '72. Tried to court-martial a private for having his boots tied wrong. Didn't end well for the sergeant. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through emails with surprising dexterity for someone who'd just played the doddering grandfather. Interesting thing about bullies? Ethan. They usually have something to hide. Later that night, I sat in my garage, going through HOA bylaws with a fine-tooth comb. Sarah had been right. Brenda had driven out multiple families, always using the same tactics: escalating fines, public humiliation, and eventually forced compliance or departure. I found myself pacing, muttering under my breath, "She's not winning this. Not this time." The GPS tracker sat on my workbench like evidence in a crime scene. My Jeep, freshly washed and gleaming under the garage lights, seemed to mock Brenda's attempts to vilify it. Walter appeared in the doorway, holding 2 beers. "Patience, kiddo. The best traps are the ones they walk into themselves. That woman's got more ego than sense, and that makes her vulnerable. You just need to find the right pressure point." He handed me a beer and clinked his bottle against mine. "Trust me. I've dealt with plenty of Brendas in my time. They always make the same mistake. They think their little bit of power makes them untouchable. But everyone's got skeletons. And hers are rattling pretty loud. Over the next few days, I noticed Brenda's neighborhood watch in action. Greg and 2 other neighbors seemed to be taking shifts, monitoring my house, making notes whenever I drove the Jeep. It was like living in a surveillance state run by suburban soccer moms and retired middle managers with too much time on their hands. Then came the knock at midnight. I peered through the window to see a tow truck positioning itself near my Jeep. Without thinking, I ran outside in my pajamas and slippers, planting myself between the truck and my vehicle. The driver looked apologetic. "Sorry, man. Got a work order from the HOA. They said this vehicle was abandoned." "Abandoned?" I said. "I drive it every day." I could see Brenda watching from her car across the street. Phone pressed to her ear. The driver shrugged. "Look, I don't want any trouble, but if you're blocking me, I gotta call it in." As if on cue, Brenda stepped out of her car, phone still in hand. "He's threatening the driver. I need police here immediately. Yes, 47 Maple Drive. He's being aggressive and hostile." I saw Lily's bedroom window light up in my peripheral vision. She was staying with me this week, and the last thing I needed was for her to see her dad hauled away in handcuffs. My hands clenched into fists as I stood my ground, knowing that one wrong move would play right into Brenda's hands. The tow truck's engine rumbled like a countdown to disaster, and Brenda's smile in the streetlight looked like a predator who'd cornered its prey. 3 days after the tow truck incident, I was fixing breakfast for Lily when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Officer Thompson and his partner looking grim but not particularly happy about being there. "Daddy, "Who's at the door?" Lily asked, her 8-year-old voice tinged with worry. I forced a smile, ruffling her hair. "Just some people I need to talk to, sweetheart. Why don't you take your pancakes to the living room and watch cartoons?" As soon as she was safely out of earshot, I opened the door, trying to keep my voice steady. "Officers, let me guess." Brenda Sullivan called in another complaint. Thompson, whom I recognized from previous false alarms, sighed heavily. "Mr. Carter, we need to talk to you about an assault allegation, Mrs. Sullivan claims you threatened her 3 nights ago during an incident with a tow truck. She has video evidence." My heart pounded, but I kept my expression neutral. "Video evidence? That's interesting. Considering I never threatened anyone, I simply stood between a tow truck and my legally parked vehicle. Would you like to see my security camera footage from that night?" Before Thompson could respond, Brenda materialized on my lawn like a bad penny, clutching her phone and wearing her best victim face. "Officers, thank goodness you're here. This man has been terrorizing our neighborhood for months. I have everything documented." She thrust her phone at Thompson, showing what appeared to be a video. "See, right there? He's advancing on me aggressively, making threatening gestures." I leaned over to look at the screen and almost laughed despite the situation. The video had clearly been edited. Choppy cuts, strategic angles, and conveniently missing audio during key moments. It looked like something Diane, her tech-savvy sister, might have cobbled together. "Brenda's tears deserve a Hollywood star," I quipped, unable to help myself. "That video has been edited more than a reality show. I have the complete unedited footage from my security system showing exactly what happened. Would you like to compare them, Officer Thompson?" Brenda's face contorted with rage. "How dare you! Officers, he's trying to intimidate me even now. I demand you arrest him immediately. I have rights as an HOA president and a concerned citizen." She pulled out a document from her oversized purse. "Furthermore, I have here a compliance agreement. If Mr. Carter signs this, admitting to his pattern of hostile behavior and agreeing to remove his vehicle and cease all intimidation tactics, I'm willing to drop the charges." The document smelled like a trap from a mile away. Thompson took it, scanning the contents with raised eyebrows. "Ma'am, this looks more like a confession than a compliance agreement, Mr. Carter. I'd advise you not to sign anything without legal counsel." I pulled out my phone, finding the recording I'd made of Brenda during one of her rants last week. Her voice filled the air. "I'll bury you, Carter, by the time I'm done. You'll be begging to sell that piece of junk and move out. I've driven out bigger problems than you. That Jeep is an insult to everything Pineview Heights stands for, and I'll use every tool at my disposal to get rid of it. And you—" The officers exchanged glances. Thompson's partner, a younger cop I didn't recognize, looked distinctly uncomfortable. "Mrs. Sullivan, did you make those statements?" Thompson asked. Brenda sputtered, her carefully constructed victim persona cracking. "That's taken out of context." "He provoked me. He's been recording me without my consent." "Actually," I said, tracing my finger along the Jeep's Sheriff Department logo visible through the window, "Florida is a 2-party consent state. But those recordings were made in public spaces during HOA meetings where recording is permitted. It's all in the bylaws you love to quote." Thompson held up a hand to stop Brenda's incoming tirade. "Here's what's going to happen. Mr. Carter, I need you to provide us with your unedited security footage. Mrs. Sullivan, we'll need the original video file from your phone, not just what you've shown us, until we can verify what actually happened." "No one's getting arrested today." As he spoke, he let something slip that made my ears perk up. "You know, Walter Hayes still bugs my boss sometimes about old cases. Guy never really retired, just changed his focus." He gave me a meaningful look. "Small world, isn't it?" Brenda's face went pale at the mention of Walter's name. "Walter Hayes. The Walter Hayes." She looked at me with new understanding, and what might have been fear. "You didn't mention your grandfather was—" "What, Brenda?" I asked innocently. A decorated sheriff who still has connections throughout law enforcement? Didn't seem relevant to an HOA matter. After the officers left with copies of both videos and a promise to follow up, Brenda stood on my lawn, visibly shaken but trying to maintain her composure. This isn't over. Carter, that Jeep is still in violation, and I have the full weight of the HOA behind me. Next week's meeting. We're voting on a complete ban of your vehicle from Pineview Heights. You have 7 days to get your affairs in order. She click-clacked away in her heels, but not before I caught her sending a furious text message. Later that evening, while Lily did homework at the kitchen table, Sarah stopped by with disturbing news. Ethan, I overheard Brenda at the coffee shop. She's planning something big for the annual HOA picnic in 2 weeks. Something about making an example of you in front of the whole neighborhood. She also mentioned getting sworn affidavits from residents about your threatening behavior. I walked Lily out to the Jeep to grab her backpack, my hand resting on the spare tire with its Sheriff Department logo. The weight of potentially losing my home, and worse, looking bad in a custody battle, pressed down on me. Daddy, why does that mean lady hate our Jeep so much? Lily asked, running her small hand along the fender. Sometimes people fear what they can't control. Baby girl, I said, doubting whether I was strong enough to protect her from this mess. Sarah, who'd been waiting by the garage, must have seen something in my expression. She walked over and squeezed my shoulder. Hey, you're tougher than her, Ethan. We all see it. That's why she's so desperate to break you. You're the first one who hasn't backed down. That night, after Lily was asleep, I took my dog for a walk. Deliberately passing Brenda's house, when Buster decided to park himself on her pristine curb for a bathroom break, I didn't hurry him along, just smiled and waved at her security camera. Petty? Maybe. But sometimes you had to fight petty with petty. My phone buzzed with a text that made my blood run cold. It was from Brenda. Sell your Jeep or lose your house, and Lily, your choice. You have 1 week before I file papers that will make you look like an unfit parent. Don't test me, I kicked my Jeep's tire in frustration, the Liberty 22 plate gleaming defiantly under the streetlight. As I noticed unfamiliar cars slowly circling my block, Brenda's neighborhood watch cronies, no doubt, I made a decision. If she wanted to play dirty, I'd dig up every secret she'd buried in her perfectly manicured life. The war for Pineview Heights was about to get real. The week before the HOA picnic crawled by like molasses, each day bringing new attempts by Brenda to document my supposed crimes against suburbia. I'd started keeping a log of every interaction, every hostile glare, every time one of her minions drove slowly past my house taking photos. Sarah and I had developed a system. She'd text me warnings when she spotted Brenda's surveillance squad, and I'd make sure to be on my best behavior. But playing defense wasn't going to win this war. Thursday evening, Walter sat at my kitchen table, sorting through old papers with the focused intensity of a man on a mission. You know, Ethan, back in my sheriff days, we had a saying, when someone's slinging mud, check their own backyard first. That woman's got more red flags than a communist parade. He slid a paper across to me, a printout from the state's business registry. Our HOA president used to run a property management company, shut down 3 years ago after multiple complaints and a fraud investigation. Interesting, wouldn't you say? I studied the document, pieces of a puzzle starting to form in my mind. So, she went from allegedly defrauding renters to running our HOA with an iron fist. That's quite a career transition. Walter's eyes twinkled with mischief. Gets better. My old buddy at the courthouse says she's been in small claims court 12 times in 5 years, always as the defendant. Woman's got a pattern of taking money that isn't hers. Sarah arrived with her own intelligence, looking like a spy delivering state secrets. You're not going to believe what I found in the HOA's public records. Remember how Brenda always brags about our healthy reserve fund? Well, the last 3 years of financial statements show some very creative accounting. Money goes in, but the withdrawals are all coded as emergency maintenance, with no specifics. The three of us sat there, surrounded by papers and laptop screens, building our case like detectives working a cold case. Every document painted a clearer picture of Brenda Sullivan, a woman who'd found a new kingdom to rule after her business empire crumbled. Saturday's neighborhood barbecue was Brenda's pre-picnic power play, and she didn't disappoint. She'd stationed herself by the food table like a general surveying her troops, Greg hovering nearby like an eager lieutenant. I'd barely grabbed a burger when her voice cut through the cheerful chatter. "Oh, look, everyone! Ethan brought his 8-year-old daughter to a community event. Let's hope he teaches her better respect for rules than he shows." She said it loud enough for Lily to hear, and I saw my daughter's face fall. That crossed a line. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to remain level. "You know what, Brenda? My Jeep's more neighborly than you'll ever be. At least it helps people instead of tearing them down." The crowd went quiet, everyone suddenly very interested in their potato salad. Brenda's smile turned predatory. "Such hostility! Everyone! Please take note of Mr. Carter's aggressive behavior. This is exactly why we need stricter enforcement of our community standards." She turned to Sarah next, apparently deciding to expand her target list. "And Mrs. Bennett, I noticed your garbage cans were out past noon on Wednesday. That's a $50 fine. Also, several neighbors have complained about your son's skateboard noise." Sarah's face flushed. "What neighbors? Name one person who's complained about Max." Brenda waved dismissively. "The complaints were anonymous, as permitted by our bylaws. We must protect residents from retaliation by rule breakers like yourself." Greg nodded enthusiastically, though I noticed his enthusiasm wavered when he caught my eye. There was something different in his expression. Doubt, maybe, or just fear of picking the wrong side. The barbecue continued with the joy of a funeral reception. Brenda made sure to loudly discuss the upcoming HOA meeting, dropping hints about major violations and necessary evictions while shooting meaningful glances my way. Later that evening, Sarah and I huddled in my garage, reviewing our findings. She looked exhausted, the threat of losing custody of Max wearing on her like a physical weight. "I can't lose my son, Ethan. But I also can't keep living like this, walking on eggshells in my own neighborhood." "We're going to expose her at the picnic," I said, showing her the documents Walter had found. "But we need more. We need something that shows she's using HOA funds for personal gain." Sarah's eyes lit up. "The HOA office. Brenda keeps all the financial records there, and I know where she hides the spare key. Saw her use it last month when she forgot hers. It was risky, but we were running out of time." That night, while Brenda attended her book club, Sarah and I made our move. The HOA office was a converted house at the neighborhood entrance, dark and quiet. My heart hammered as Sarah retrieved the key from inside a fake rock by the back door. "Just grab photos of anything suspicious," I whispered, using my phone's flashlight to navigate. "We're not stealing anything, just documenting." The files were a gold mine of questionable transactions. Payments to B. Sullivan Consulting for amounts that made my eyes water. Contracts with vendors that shared addresses with Brenda's previous businesses. And then the smoking gun. Emails between Brenda and her sister Diane, discussing how to code personal expenses as HOA necessities. I was photographing the emails when headlights swept across the window. My blood turned to ice as I recognized the sound of Brenda's heels on the walkway. Sarah grabbed my arm, and we scrambled toward the back door. But the knob turned before we could reach it. In desperation, I dove under a desk while Sarah squeezed behind a filing cabinet. Brenda entered, talking on her phone. "Yes, the restraining order paperwork is ready. Carter won't know what hit him by the time of the picnic. He'll either be banned from attending or arrested if he shows up." My legs cramped as I held perfectly still. praying she wouldn't turn on the lights. She grabbed something from her desk and left, the door clicking shut behind her. We waited 5 agonizing minutes before extracting ourselves and fleeing into the night. Back at my house, adrenaline still coursing through our veins. I reviewed the photos. This is it, Sarah. This is what we need to bury her. But my victory felt hollow when I checked my email and found an official notice. I was banned from the HOA picnic due to credible threats of violence and disruption. The ban hit like a slap, locking me out of my own chance at justice. Sarah texted within minutes. Brenda's got a secret money trail. I heard her on the phone. Something about offshore accounts. We need to get into that picnic. I stared at my Jeep in the driveway. It's Liberty, 22 plates, mocking my helplessness. But then I remembered Walter's words about patience and traps. Slipping on my sneakers, I made a decision. Banned or not, I was going to crash Brenda's party and blow her corruption wide open. She'd threatened my home, my daughter, and my friends. The war for Pineview Heights was about to see its decisive battle. And I'd be damned if I watched from the sidelines. My phone buzzed with another text from Sarah. I've got a plan. Trust me. As Brenda's spies circled my block one more time, I smiled grimly. She thought she'd won by banning me, but she'd just made her biggest mistake. She'd given me nothing left to lose. The morning of the HOA picnic dawned bright and clear, mocking my dark mood as I paced my living room like a caged animal. Sarah arrived early with her son, Max, and a mischievous glint in her eye. Okay, here's the plan. You're banned, but Walter isn't. He'll be our Trojan horse while you stay nearby in the Jeep, ready to move when I give the signal. She handed me a small earpiece. My cousin's a private investigator. Borrowed these from him. Will be able to communicate without Brenda knowing. Walter emerged from his room, wearing his most harmless-looking cardigan and wielding a cane he definitely didn't need. Time to give an Oscar-worthy performance. Kiddo, that woman's about to learn why you don't mess with a haze. I told Sarah I'd play dumb to make Brenda overconfident, but sitting in my Jeep a block away from the park, listening to the festivities through the earpiece, tested every ounce of my patience. Walter's voice crackled through. In position. Brenda's holding court by the pavilion, surrounded by her faithful. She's already mentioning your absence to anyone who'll listen. Sarah's commentary followed. I can picture the scene. Families enjoying hot dogs and sunshine, while Brenda politics, turning neighbor against neighbor with her silver tongue. Ladies and gentlemen, Brenda's voice carried even to my position. I'm sad to report that certain disruptive elements had to be excluded from today's event for everyone's safety. But that's what strong leadership looks like. Making tough decisions to protect our community. The smug satisfaction in her voice made my hands clench the steering wheel. Sarah whispered, She's really laying it on thick. Half the crowd looks uncomfortable, but they're too scared to say anything. Greg's here, but he keeps checking his phone and frowning. Then Walter's moment came. Excuse me, young lady. His voice quavered perfectly. What's your name again? Belinda? Beatrice? It's Brenda, she snapped, loud enough for everyone to hear her lose her composure at an elderly man. I'm sorry, dear. My memory isn't what it used to be, say. Didn't we have a nice young man named Ethan who helped everyone? Where is he? The silence that followed was deafening. Brenda recovered quickly, but the damage was done. Mr. Hayes, as I've explained, your grandson has been excluded due to behavioral issues. Now, if we could return to the agenda. But Walter wasn't done playing the confused grandpa. He fumbled with his phone, accidentally playing a recording at full volume. Brenda's voice screeching about crushing me and making an example for the neighborhood. Oh dear, how do I turn this off? Technology these days. The crowd stirred uneasily. Sarah took her cue, standing up with Max. You know what? I'm tired of this, Brenda. You've turned our neighborhood into a police state. You spy on us, fine us for breathing wrong. And now you're banning people from community events. That's not leadership. That's dictatorship. How dare you? Brenda's mask finally slipped completely. I've worked tirelessly to maintain standards in this neighborhood. If certain people can't follow simple rules... She was interrupted by a commotion near the parking lot. I'd received Sarah's signal and was walking toward the pavilion. Not in my Jeep, but on foot, carrying a box of documents. If she wanted to make this about me personally, I'd give her what she wanted. Call the police. Brenda shrieked. He's violating the ban! He's trespassing! But I wasn't alone. Behind me walked a dozen neighbors. The Chens, the Johnsons, even some faces I didn't recognize. They'd been waiting by their cars, ready to support me when the moment came. Actually, Brenda, I said calmly, setting the box on a picnic table, I'm here as a concerned citizen to present evidence of HOA financial misconduct, which is protected under State Statute 4.5, which supersedes any HOA ban when reporting potential fraud. The color drained from Brenda's face as I pulled out document after document. Payments to B. Sullivan Consulting. That's you, isn't it? $20,000 over 2 years for administrative services that seem to consist of cashing checks. The crowd pressed closer. Murmurs growing louder, Greg stepped forward. His usual swagger gone. Brenda, is this true? You said the money was for neighborhood improvements. Sarah's laptop appeared on the table, displaying the emails we'd photographed. Here's Brenda discussing with her sister how to hide personal expenses. Restaurant bills coded as HOA meetings. Vacation receipts labeled as conference attendance. A new laptop purchased with HOA funds but registered to Brenda's home address. Brenda tried to rally. This is all fabricated. He broke into the HOA office. He's a criminal trying to frame me because I enforced rules he didn't like. Don't you see what's happening here? He's manipulated you all. But her accusations fell flat when Walter's friend from the sheriff's department, Deputy Clark, stepped out from the crowd. He'd been there the whole time, observing in civilian clothes at Walter's request. Mrs. Sullivan, those are serious counter-accusations. We'll need to investigate all of this properly. The final blow came from an unexpected source. A neighbor I barely knew, Mrs. Patterson, raised her hand. I have something to say. Last year, I paid $500 for a special assessment that Brenda said was for new playground equipment. But I volunteer at the community center. That equipment was donated by a local business. Where did our money go? Others began speaking up, sharing stories of mysterious fees and assessments that never resulted in visible improvements. Brenda's kingdom was crumbling before our eyes, and her response was pure rage. You ungrateful fools! I've sacrificed everything for this neighborhood. I've maintained order while you people let your properties deteriorate and your children run wild. She spun to face me, her carefully styled hair now disheveled, makeup running in the heat. This is all your fault, Carter. You and that hideous Jeep. You've poisoned them against me. Sarah stepped forward, laptop in hand. Actually, Brenda, you did this to yourself. Oh, and that tracking device you put on Ethan's Jeep? We traced the purchase. Your credit card. Your Amazon account. Deputy Clark has those records. 2. The crowd gasped. Even Greg looked shocked. Brenda, you said you didn't know anything about a tracker? Officer Thompson arrived just as Brenda made a break for the parking lot. But there was nowhere to run. Neighbors surrounded us on all sides, all with stories to tell and grievances to air. As Thompson reviewed the evidence, Brenda's Victim Act went into overdrive. They're all conspiring against me. This is harassment. I demand my lawyer. But the documents spoke louder than her protests. $20,000 was missing, and the paper trail led right to her personal accounts. As Brenda was escorted to Thompson's patrol car, I caught sight of Walter by the dessert table, calmly eating a piece of pie, as if he hadn't just orchestrated the downfall of a tyrant. He winked at me and mouthed, "Patience, kiddo." The picnic continued in a strange mood of celebration and shock. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in months were suddenly sharing stories and contact information. Greg approached me sheepishly. "Ethan, I owe you an apology. I thought Brenda was just strict, but this, I should have seen it." I clapped him on the shoulder. Feeling generous in victory? We all got fooled, Greg. The important thing is making sure it doesn't happen again. But as I walked back to my Jeep, I knew this wasn't over. Brenda had been arrested, but she'd make bail, and cornered animals were always the most dangerous. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This isn't over. Carter, I've got one more card to play, and when I do, you'll lose everything. As neighbors celebrated around me, I stared at the message, knowing Brenda's final desperate move was coming. The day after the picnic disaster, I was helping Sarah install new locks on her doors when Officer Thompson's patrol car pulled up to my house. My stomach dropped as I saw his grim expression through the windshield. This wasn't a social visit. Behind him, another car arrived. Brenda, out on bail and looking like she'd aged 10 years overnight, accompanied by a woman who could only be her sister, Diane. "Mr. Carter," Thompson began, clearly uncomfortable. "Mrs. Sullivan has filed new charges. She claims you planted that financial evidence to frame her." I almost laughed at the absurdity, but the serious look on Thompson's face killed any humor. "She also has a witness who says she saw you breaking into the HOA office and fabricating documents." Diane stepped forward, her voice trembling with what I assumed was rehearsed emotion. "I saw him that night. He had a computer and was creating fake emails to make my sister look guilty. She's been nothing but dedicated to this neighborhood, and he's trying to destroy her because she held him accountable." The accusation hit like a punch to the gut. This was Brenda's nuclear option. If she was going down, she'd take me with her. Thompson looked genuinely apologetic as he explained, "Mr. Carter, given the severity of these allegations and the sworn witness statement, I need you to come to the station for questioning. You're not under arrest, but I'd advise you to contact a lawyer." As I stood there, trying to process this reversal of fortune, I noticed Sarah recording everything on her phone from her porch. Walter appeared in my doorway, no longer playing the confused grandfather, but every inch the former sheriff. His eyes were steel as they locked onto Brenda. "This is a mistake," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Deputy Clark has all the evidence. He knows those documents are real." Brenda's smile was poisonous. "Evidence can be interpreted many ways, Mr. Carter. And unlike you, I have witnesses to support my version of events." Before getting in Thompson's car, I pulled out a small notebook from my pocket and scribbled something quickly. As I passed Diane, I pressed the note into her hand, making sure Brenda didn't see. Her eyes widened as she read my message. "Lying under oath is a felony. 5 years in prison. Your kids need their mom. Think carefully." At the station, I spent 3 hours in an interrogation room. Going over every detail of the past months, Thompson was professional but thorough, and I could see doubt creeping into his expression as Brenda's story grew more elaborate with each retelling. She claimed I'd hacked into her bank accounts, forged documents, and orchestrated an elaborate conspiracy involving multiple neighbors. "Mrs. Sullivan," Thompson finally said, "you're saying Mr. Carter is some kind of criminal mastermind who fooled dozens of people, including a deputy sheriff?" Brenda's composure cracked slightly. "He's clever. He turned everyone against me. Check his computer. You'll find evidence of forgery software." But the real drama was happening outside. Sarah later told me that while I was being questioned, she and Walter had been busy. They'd gathered every neighbor who'd been wronged by Brenda, creating a crowd outside the police station. Greg was there too, holding a sign that read, "Justice for Pine View Heights." The game changer came when Diane emerged from the station, tears streaming down her face. The note I'd given her had worked its magic, helped along by the crowd of angry neighbors and the reality of potentially destroying her life for her sister's vendetta. "I can't do this anymore," she announced to Deputy Clark, who'd been monitoring the situation. I lied. "Brenda made me. She said she'd pay off my credit cards if I backed up her story." Inside the interrogation room, I could hear commotion in the hallway. Thompson excused himself, returning minutes later with a completely different expression. "Mr. Carter, You're free to go, Ms. Diane Sullivan has recanted her statement and admitted to perjury at her sister's request. As I walked out, I passed Brenda being led to a holding cell, her designer outfit replaced with standard-issue jail wear. She locked eyes with me, and for a moment, I saw the terrified woman beneath the tyrant, someone who'd built her entire identity on control and couldn't handle losing it. "This is your fault," she hissed. "You destroyed everything I worked for." I paused, thinking of all the families she'd driven from their homes, all the neighbors she'd terrorized. "No, Brenda, you destroyed it yourself the moment you decided your power mattered more than people." Outside, the crowd erupted in cheers as I emerged. Walter stood by my Jeep, running his hand over the Liberty 22 plates with a satisfied smile. "Told you patience would pay off, kiddo." "Sometimes the best trap is letting them trap themselves." Sarah hugged me tightly, tears of relief in her eyes. "We did it! We actually did it. Max and I don't have to live in fear anymore." But the celebration was bittersweet. As we drove home, I couldn't shake the image of Diane's shattered expression or Brenda's complete breakdown. Victory wasn't supposed to feel this complicated. That evening, as neighbors gathered for an impromptu celebration in my driveway, Greg approached with a sheepish expression. "Ethan, I need to apologize properly. I was so eager to belong, to be part of the in crowd, that I ignored what Brenda was doing. I saw the signs but chose to look away." His honesty was refreshing. "We all make mistakes, Greg. What matters is what you do next." "That's the thing," he said, glancing at the growing crowd. "I want to help rebuild our community, make it what it should have been all along. A place where neighbors help each other instead of policing each other." As the party continued, I found myself standing alone by my Jeep, processing everything that had happened. The vehicle that had started this whole conflict stood proud and unbowed, its sheriff department logo catching the setting sun. Lily, who was with me for the weekend, ran up and hugged my leg. "Daddy? Everyone seems so happy. Is the mean lady gone?" I picked her up, feeling the weight of protecting her innocence. "Yeah, baby girl, she won't bother us anymore." But even as I said it, my phone buzzed with one final message from Brenda, sent just before they'd confiscated her phone. "Enjoy your victory. But remember, I know where you live, where your daughter goes to school. This story isn't over." I deleted the message and held Lily tighter. Tomorrow, Walter would share some news that would put the final nail in Brenda's coffin. But tonight, I just wanted to enjoy this moment of peace with my daughter and neighbors, my faithful Jeep standing guard like a mechanical protector. The war for Pineview Heights was almost over, but one last revelation would ensure Brenda could never hurt anyone again. The next morning arrived with Walter sitting at my kitchen table, his old sheriff's uniform laid out before him like battle armor. The sight of it made me do a double-take. I hadn't seen him in uniform since his retirement party 15 years ago. "Today's the day we end this properly," he said, his weathered hands smoothing out the creases in the fabric. "Brenda Sullivan's about to learn that some mistakes can't be undone with money or threats." He pulled out a manila folder thick with documents, his eyes twinkling with the satisfaction of a chess master about to call checkmate. "Remember when Thompson mentioned I still bug the department about old cases? Well, I've been doing more than just bugging them. I've been consulting on financial crimes, and guess whose name popped up in a federal investigation 6 months ago?" My coffee mug froze halfway to my lips as the implications hit me. "Federal investigation? Walter, what have you been sitting on?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Patience, kiddo. Had to let her incriminate herself fully first. See, Brenda didn't just steal from our HOA. She's been running this scam across 3 different neighborhoods, using fake identities and shell companies. The FBI's been building a case, but they needed someone on the inside to document her methods." He spread out the papers, showing bank records, corporate filings, and email chains that painted a picture of systematic fraud spanning years. When she targeted you over that Jeep, she had no idea she was messing with the grandson of someone who'd been quietly helping federal agents track her activities. The irony was delicious. Brenda had walked right into a trap that had been months in the making. Later that morning, we convened at the community center for an emergency HOA meeting. The room was packed with neighbors I'd never seen at meetings before. Word had spread about Brenda's arrest and Diane's confession, and everyone wanted to witness the final act. Walter entered in full uniform, his presence commanding immediate respect. Even neighbors who'd lived here for years had no idea about his law enforcement background. Deputy Clark was there too, along with someone I didn't recognize, a woman in a sharp suit who introduced herself as Special Agent Rodriguez from the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division. The murmur that went through the crowd at those three letters was audible. Greg sat in the front row, his face pale with shock. "Ladies and gentlemen," Clark began, "we're here to inform you about the scope of the investigation into Brenda Sullivan. What started as HOA fraud has revealed a much larger criminal enterprise. Special Agent Rodriguez took over, her voice crisp and professional. Mrs. Sullivan has been operating similar schemes in the Willowbrook and Riverside Heights neighborhoods. Using false identities and collaborating with her sister, she's embezzled approximately $150,000 over 4 years." The gasps from the crowd were genuine shock. Walter stood, every inch the lawman despite his retirement. "My grandson recorded something interesting during one of Brenda's rants, with his permission. I'd like to play it for federal evidence." He pulled out a recording device and pressed play. Brenda's voice filled the room, clear and damning. "The HOA treasury is my personal piggy bank. These idiots pay their assessments without question, and as long as I throw them a few cosmetic improvements, they never ask where the rest goes. I've got this down to a science." The recording continued with Brenda detailing exactly how she moved money through fake vendors and shell companies. It was the kind of confession prosecutors dream about. Detailed, voluntary, and absolutely devastating. "That's been submitted as evidence," Rodriguez announced. "Combined with the financial records and Mrs. Sullivan's attempt to frame Mr. Carter, she's looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison." The number hit the room like a bomb. 2 hours later, we stood outside the police station as Brenda was transferred to federal custody. She'd been denied bail this time. The scope of her crimes and her previous attempt to frame me made her a flight risk. As the agents led her to the transport van, she caught sight of our group. Walter stepped forward, ensuring she could see his uniform clearly. "Thought I was out to pasture, didn't you?" His voice carried across the parking lot. "Here's a lesson for you. Never mistake kindness for weakness. And never underestimate a Hayes man protecting his family." Brenda's face went through a series of expressions: shock, rage, and finally defeat. 1 month later, Pineview Heights felt like a different neighborhood. The emergency HOA board had eliminated half the ridiculous rules, reduced fees to reasonable levels, and actually started using funds for real improvements. Sarah had been elected as the new president, running on a platform of transparency and common sense. At our first post-Brenda community barbecue, I parked my Jeep right in front of the pavilion. It's Liberty. 22 plates gleaming in the afternoon sun. Nobody complained. In fact, several neighbors asked for rides. Wanting to experience the vehicle that had somehow triggered the downfall of a criminal enterprise, Greg had become one of my closest friends, channeling his need to belong into organizing neighborhood events that actually brought people together. As the sun set on our peaceful gathering, I stood with Walter and Sarah, watching our transformed community. Lily played with the other kids, her laughter carrying across the park. This was what a neighborhood should be. People living together, helping each other without fear of a tyrant measuring their grass with a ruler. "You know," I said, looking at my Jeep, "Brenda thought it was a symbol of defiance. She was right, but not in the way she imagined. It represents freedom, the freedom to be yourself, to help your neighbors, to live without fear. Walter clapped me on the shoulder. Not bad, kiddo. Though next time, maybe we handle things before the FBI gets involved, we laughed. The sound carrying across our free neighborhood as my Jeep stood sentinel, a four-wheeled reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of defiance can topple the mightiest tyrants. Brenda had wanted to rule through fear, but she'd learned too late that courage is contagious. Justice has a long memory, and you should never underestimate a community that's found its backbone. Subscribe to HOA Tragedies for more stories of everyday people standing up to bullies. And remember, sometimes the best revenge is just living well and parking. However you damn well please. Another day, another ridiculous situation. HOA Tragedies delivers again. Don't forget to like and follow us for more juicy chaos.